This is Tuesday's reading lesson. This week we're reading the book Grandma's Records. And our strategy focus is to think of questions about the boy, his grandmother, and their traditions that you would like to discuss later. Also, today's activity is doing a categories chart. So we'll work on this after we've read the story. So sorting out or classifying details in a story, it actually helps us keep track of the information and understand the story better, which is why we practice this. So we're going to think about things that the boy does on his own and things that the boy does with his grandma. So we're sorting out the information in the story into categories. Things he does on his own, things he does with his grandma. Okay, but we're going to set this graphic organizer aside while we read Grandma's Records by Eric Velasquez. And I'm on page 192 of your reading textbook. Every year, right after the last day of school, I'd pack a suitcase with my cool summer clothes, my favorite toys, and a sketchbook. Then my dog, Daisy, and I were off to Grandma's apartment in El Barrio. Because my parents worked, Grandma's apartment was my summer home. From the time my parents dropped me off until the day they picked me up, Grandma wrapped me in her world of music. Sometimes when she played a record, we would dance together. Other times, she would dance alone and tell me her stories about growing up in Puerto Rico. When Grandma played a merengue from the Dominican Republic, her hips would sway from side to side. As her favorite salsa record played, she'd say, "Just listen to that conga," while she played an imaginary drum. Grandma liked all types of music, but one record was very special to her. Whenever she played it, she would put her hand over her heart and close her eyes as she sang along. When it was over, Grandma would sometimes sit quietly, thinking about Grandpa and the old days in Santurce, her hometown. Sometimes Grandma said, "A song can say everything that is in your heart, as if it was written just for you." My favorite days were the ones when Grandma would tell me, "You pick the records today." No matter what I would choose, Grandma would always say, "Siempre me gusta tu selección." I always like your selection. Sometimes I would sneak in Grandma's special song just to watch her put her hand over her heart and sing. Then she'd always ask, "Como tú sabes?" How did you know? If it was too hot to go outside, I'd spend hours looking through all of Grandma's album covers. I'd pick out my favorites and make sketches of the art. As I drew, I could see the record covers coming to life and the bands performing right there in Grandma's living room. Grandma never went to any nightclubs to see her favorite bands perform. She was happy just to stay home with me and listen to her scratchy records. But Santurce was home to hundreds of musicians, and she knew a lot of the people who played on the records. Grandma's nephew, Sammy, played percussion in Rafael Cortijo's band, the best band in Puerto Rico. One day, when the band was in town, Sammy brought over Cortijo and the band's lead singer, Ismael Rivera, for a surprise visit. Home-cooked meals were hard to come by on the road, and they couldn't pass up the chance to taste Grandma's famous arroz con gandules, rice and pigeon peas. While eating dessert, Sammy had another surprise for Grandma. 2 tickets to the band's first New York concert and their brand new record, which wasn't even in the stores yet. I raced over to the record player, thrilled to be the first New Yorker to hear their latest music. The next day, Grandma and I spent all day shopping for clothes to wear to the show. She even made me get a haircut. The theater was all the way up in the Bronx. We took the subway there, and Grandma was nervous during the whole ride. When we got to the theater, we walked past the long line of people and went right inside because of our special tickets. The theater was bigger than all the movie theaters I had ever gone to. The band made a spectacular entrance. Suddenly, the theater went dark. Tiny lights glittered, and a loud siren filled the air. I heard Grandma gasp, "Ay, Dios mío!" Oh my God. She thought something was wrong. The darkened stage seemed to fill with people running back and forth in confusion. Next, everything went dark again, and a loud and steady conga beat began. Boom back, boom back, boom back. Then the lights came on with a loud boom, and the band began to play the song El Bombón de Elena, Elena's Candy. Grandma and I were surprised at how different the music sounded live. The musicians made familiar songs sound fresh by adding new musical phrases and words. Before the last song began, Ishmael said, "This one goes out to Carmen," and he pointed to Grandma as he sang her special song. I looked at her as she put her hand over her heart, raised the other hand, and closed her eyes, and began to sing along. Ishmael was singing to my grandma,